There's been a controversy that's had the internet in a bigger uproar than usual as of late. The controversy involves the accusation that members of the video game industry and press had an improper relationship with a game developer that gave many the impression that this relationship led to positive exposure for the developer's game. With lots of innuendo and speculation being flung around, it's been hard to keep track of what's fact and what's opinion, as well as keep a cohesive timeline or narrative of the events. A well-made video was made by YouTube user InternetAristocrat that does a good job of addressing the issue as well as the implications it has, but I felt that it contained a bit too much vitriol and was off-putting to many. I honestly don't blame him, he's very passionate about his hobby as I am. I felt his impassioned nature lended to take away from the video, so I thought I'd put together a short introductory video that outlines what happens and what it means for people, as well as maybe present it in a way that I can show to someone like my grandmother. Let's lay some groundwork. For those unacquainted with the video games industry, or even for the casual observer, the face of the industry are a number of these big-name news outlets. For them, what is presented by these outlets is generally accepted as truth or fact, and trends shown by them reflect the trends of the community at large. The past few years, however, has shown scandal after scandal wherein the game journalism industry was shown to have improper ties with developers and publishers in the industry, as well as larger name corporate sponsors they rely on for funding. But this is a separate issue for a separate discussion. The point that should be taken away here is that what is espoused by game journalism outlets generally isn't in line with all members of the community. One of the more hot topic issues falls under the topic of a movement known as social justice. Social justice is, or many would say was, a movement intended to bring about a more diverse and accepting environment for people of all backgrounds, genders, races, sexuality, etc. While the movement itself is admirable, a few have pointed out that some people who have championed this movement may have had more few opportunistic motives for such a point of view. So here's the issue at large. There's a video game developer named Zoe Quinn. She has a game that's a text-based choose-your-own-adventure title that chronicles her interpretation of the experience of depression. The game was submitted under a publishing service offered by Steam called Greenlight. Steam, made by Valve Software, is a platform for the sale and distribution of video games for the personal computer, and Greenlight is the service they offer for smaller independent publishers and individuals to get their game out there. The process for approval involves community votes, where people vote on the merits of the game that is being published, and say if it meets criteria for quality and is something that they would see themselves buying. The first time Zoe Quinn submitted her game, the community was less than impressed with what was presented, and as a result, the game did not make the approval process. So, the game was submitted a second time. At the second time of her submission, Zoe stated that she was met with a wave of toxic harassment that targeted her as a woman. Her harassment was made public and published throughout the many large news outlets. A few large names within the industry championed her cause and, as a result, allowed her game to garner a good bit of exposure. During the approvals process for her second submission, many were saying that they were approving her game as a show of solidarity for her harassment. The game made the approvals process and was on its way to be distributed digitally through the largest platform for personal computers. This is where things get odd. During Zoe's harassment, she named a certain website. The website, which will not be named here, was one that was a host for groups of people who had some sort of depression or social anxiety, and as a result did not have much success with the opposite sex. We're talking about people who get panic attacks at the very idea of talking to a woman. A website that has a suicide hotline number as part of the rotating banner ad at the top of their page. She claimed that these people were largely responsible for calling a woman on the phone and moaning lewdly into it, as well as saying a host of derogatory things. There was no evidence to say that this did not happen, but the evidence that she chose to show were 2 inflammatory posts within a 10-post thread. The other 8 posts were varying responses of, "Go away." The story was run by multiple news outlets, championed by outspoken proponents of the social justice movement who held many places in bigger news outlets. And the people of this website were vilified. They were marked by many as the lowest forms of life, and still more dropped insinuation that perhaps their genitalia should meet the end of a pointed instrument. The subjects of these allegations weren't exactly the type of people that would fight back, so this point went largely unchallenged. This was almost half a year ago to date. Recently, a tell-all WordPress blog post was published by a man who was later verified to be Zoe's ex-boyfriend. In this post, he spoke at length of Zoe's infidelity during their relationship, and named individuals who she confessed to, as well as posting the intimate chat logs between the two of them. I must make this clear. The issue at hand is not the fact that Zoe was unfaithful to her boyfriend, nor is it the number of men she was unfaithful to him with. While this speaks volumes of a person's character, this is generally not a subject for public discussion outside of tabloid news. The glaring issue at hand is who Zoe had these relationships with. A few of the men were colleagues, fellow independent game developers, people who contributed to the development of games, as well as one man who would eventually become her professional superior. Another person she was accused of having an improper relationship with is Mr. Brandon McCartan, another game developer who worked on a game title known as Fez. One of the most outspoken defendants of Ms. Quinn has been the game's chief creator, Phil Fish. But the biggest alarms rang when one of the men was revealed to be Nathan Grayson, a writer for Kotaku and Rock Paper Shotgun, two of the larger news outlets that gave her game coverage, which Grayson himself wrote about. This presented a direct conflict of interest, as Grayson had an improper relationship with the subject of his writing that gave the impression that this relationship contributed to the positive exposure her game would receive. There has been some controversy in determining whether or not Grayson published his pieces before or after having the improper sexual relationship with Ms. Quinn, but it needs to be mentioned that even if Nathan Grayson and Zoe Quinn weren't sleeping together at the time of any coinciding reviews, articles, or other work, they still had a relationship. This constitutes cronyism, regardless of whether it was sexual or friendly. The response has been messy. Among the fans and consumers, many chose to target Zoe herself for her infidelity and decry her actions. Still more were disgusted at the state of the industry itself, for while they knew that members of the press were in bed, so to speak, with developers and publishers, this was the first known instance where this may have been literally the case. And only recently have calls to actions been made against the men who chose to have an improper relationship with Ms. Quinn. Among the people inside the industry, few have chosen to spoke against the improper nature of the relationship with Mrs. Quinn, and chose instead to show how, once again, the world was vilifying a female developer on the grounds that she was a woman. Again, this is not and should not be what is being discussed. And as an aside, I find it very problematic that many in the industry don't seem to have an issue with a member of the games journalism press sleeping with a member of a development team. This just speaks volumes about the state of the industry as it is. Here's where it gets messier. A video was posted to YouTube by a user named Mundane Matt. After gaining some traction, the video, which explained the situation at the time the video was released, was eventually removed on the alleged basis of a copyright claim by Zoe Quinn for the use of a still image from her game. This raised a few eyebrows. A noteworthy member and commentator of the video games community named Total Biscuit gave a moderate response to the controversy, and his response made a very popular thread on a content aggregator site called Reddit. It almost reached 30,000 comments, but opening the thread relieves a massive deletion of said comments. This raised more eyebrows. Another news aggregator site called N4G, which is short for News for Gamers, also had an article detailing the controversy. It too was eventually taken down. A small news outlet published a rundown of the controversy as it unfolded. The site went down, and the administrators of the site revealed that their hosting provider contacted them to either take the story down or the site would be taken down. They chose the latter. Even more eyebrows were raised, and the Streisand effect was in full swing. And so, here we are. People on both sides of the debate flinging mud at each other. And what's most troublesome and most terrifying is that people like me are of the opinion that nothing will come of this. There will be no changes. Everything will carry on business as usual. Nothing will change. I just wanted to play video games.